you're going to see the future of concentration camps. The death camps of the future are going to be just giant surveillance zones, and they're going to be kill zones. Just like how in Israel, they made the Netzarim corridor into a ginormous kill zone. And they would just kill people at random and laugh about it, and they didn't give a shit. And it was fun. They killed people for sport. The Israelis did. They just killed people for sport. And they're still doing that. So you're seeing the future of genocide, wherein you see genocidal policy enmeshed with AI technology, and AI technology being used as a means to a genocidal end. So now that I've said that, how about we talk about what happened in Gaza recently, in which people were murdered as they were trying to get food because they're starving. So in Gaza, there are 3 aid distribution centers. And those, under the United Nations, there were hundreds of distribution centers, hundreds of aid distribution centers. Now, under the Americans, now that America is running the aid operation in conjunction with Israel, now there are only 3 aid distribution centers in the entire Gaza Strip. You have millions of people living in the Gaza Strip, or at least close to 2 million people. And you have 3 distribution centers, and they force the people to go through these narrow corridors. And if you're outside of the corridor, as you're trying to get to the aid, get to the food, they can shoot you. Well, how do you expect tens of thousands of people to go through these corridors and not for there to be overcrowding? And then when there is overcrowding and people are panicking because they're in a hurry to get food, because if they don't get to the food in time, then they're not going to have any food. How can you expect people to not overcrowd and to not panic? And then you shoot those people. And then you say, well, they were walking in the area they weren't supposed to be in, even though we forced them to go through this corridor, and they number in the tens of thousands, and they're starving, and we made it so that if they don't get here on time, if they don't get to the food on time, then they have to walk home empty-handed. And where's home? Home is literally tens of miles away, and they have to walk. So they have to walk tens of miles to get to a food distribution center because they're starving and they haven't eaten for days. And then when they get to the food distribution center, they have to go through these narrow corridors, and they number in the tens of thousands. And if they don't get to the food in time, they're told, hey, you have to go back. Of course people are going to panic. Of course people are not going to listen to the rules. Of course people are not going to go directly into the corridor zone, and you're going to have overcrowding. Of course you're going to have chaos and pandemonium. And the Israelis shoot people while they're trying to get food. Of course, these people are going to be tense and anxious and not orderly. But then the Israelis say, well, we shot them because they weren't following the rules. Well, now you've just made it worse. Because the whole point, why are there only 3 aid distribution centers? And why is it so difficult to get food? Because they don't want to feed the people. The point is not to feed the people. The point is to torment the population, to push them to leave Gaza. This is the point. And after a bunch of people have been shot to death, the Israelis said, oh, we didn't shoot people. But then they said, oh yeah, we did shoot at people, but we shot at them because they were suspects, whatever that means. But then they also deny it. They said, no, we didn't shoot anybody. But then you actually look at the bullets that medical professionals have pulled out of people, and it just so happens that these bullets are Israeli. And then you have experts looking at the footage, and they can hear the gunfire, and the experts say, yeah, that gunfire sounds like it's coming out of an Israeli gun. And that gunfire sounds like it's coming out of a sophisticated firearm that is not in the hands of Hamas. So, and then you read about a massacre happening, and the Israelis say, oh, it was Hamas. But then you find out literally 1,000 feet away from the site of the massacre is an Israeli military base. Oh, so these Israeli soldiers are 1,000 feet away, and oh, it just so happens that that Hamas is there with guns blazing. Really? They're massacring people. Literally mass murder. Because they're Gazans, and because they're all terrorists in the eyes of the Israelis, and the Israelis are saying they're all terrorists, and you have these sick rabbis saying they're Amalek, and so we have to exterminate them. It's a mess, guys, and it's just evil what's happening. It's just evil, and all three of the distribution centers are either in the center of Gaza or they're in the south. There's one distribution center in the Netstream corridor where the Israelis had kill zones, by the way. And then you have two aid distribution centers in the south. So they're pushing people from the north to the south. This is the whole idea. And the idea is to pressure the Egyptians to absorb these people. That's what they want to do. Because as Bezalel Smotrich said, we're going to cleanse Gaza, everyone. But the experts are wrong. Everyone is a liar. The doctors at the Red Cross who operated on these people, they're all liars. Everyone's a liar, except for Israel. So we got a bunch of articles on this topic that we're going to get into. And we're going to read through all of them. It's going to be a little bit difficult because this is a depressing topic and there's a lot to read. And there's a lot of information to absorb. But we're going to get through this. This is a long stream, guys. This is a long-ass stream, but we will endure. We will get through this, okay? A CNN investigation into a deadly incident near an aid distribution site in southern Gaza on Sunday points to the Israeli military opening fire on crowds of Palestinians as they try to make their way to the fenced enclosure to get food. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the U.S., and Israeli-backed aid initiatives that run the site said that Israeli forces were operating in the areas during the same period. Multiple videos geolocated by CNN placed the gunfire near a roundabout where hundreds of Palestinians had gathered about half a mile 800 meters away from the militarized aid site in Tel El Sultan in Rafah. The designated route to the site along the coast, Al-Rashid Street, is in an area under the Israeli military's control, and Israeli troops operate at a base nearby. So again, this massacre happens 1,000 feet away from a military base. And it says here that the videos were geolocated and they are placed. It was determined that these videos were filmed, or that the place, or that the gunfire took part near a roundabout where Palestinians gathered about a half a mile away from the aid distribution site. So it didn't happen at the distribution site, but it happened near the distribution site, which corroborates with what everyone has been saying. All the witnesses have said that they were being shot at near the site, not at the site. So there's that. And the designated route to the site where the shooting took place is in an area under the Israeli military. So this whole area is under Israeli military control. So you're saying that in an area that's heavily militarized, that is controlled by the IDF, you had Hamas guys wandering around just shooting people. Weapons experts said the rate of gunfire heard in the footage, as well as images of bullets retrieved from victims, were consistent with machine guns used by the Israeli military that can be mounted on tanks. Multiple eyewitnesses said that they saw gunfire emanating from Israeli tanks nearby. None of the videos definitely show who fired shots outside of the aid camps. However, CNN's review of audiovisual material sheds fresh light on how the pursuit of aid turned chaotic and then dangerous, on the actions of Israeli forces and the consequences of the new aid mechanism, which has been mired in controversy. The Israeli Defense Forces initially said on Sunday that its forces did not fire at civilians while they were near or within the aid site. An Israeli military source later acknowledged that troops had fired warning shots at suspects about 1 kilometer away. So they're saying, oh yeah, we did fire at people, but it wasn't at the site. It wasn't at the food distribution site, but it was near the site. It was outside the site. Okay, everyone who says that they were shot at by the Israelis are saying that they were not shot at the food distribution site, but outside of it. So And the fact that they're acknowledging that they did fire shots at people is proof that, yes, they did shoot at people. Mohammed Sucker, 43, told CNN in an interview that he only narrowly escaped death watching people around him get shot in the head as he crouched on the ground, hoping to survive long enough to reach the site run by GHF and get food for his family. After the US-backed private foundation finally opened the site at 5 in the morning, witnesses said the Israeli military's gunfire continued nearby. Surveillance footage shared by GHF shows crowds of onrushing Palestinians scrambling to reach the limited boxes of food as tracer fire explodes into the night sky in the distance. By sunrise, the extent of the catastrophe was undeniable. Videos captured bloodied bodies of Palestinians scattered across the sands, roughly a half a mile from the food distribution center. Ooh, a half a mile. We survived a night that was worse than we could imagine. The reality for people was one of death and hunger, searching for food. When GHF announced its distribution plans for Sunday, the instructors were direct. Only one aid site would be open starting... Only one aid site would be open starting at 5 a.m. And the IDF would be present in the area to secure passage on a designated route. So they were killed on the route toward the distribution site, and that route is heavily guarded by Israeli soldiers. But no, it was Hamas that did this. I'm gonna go by my gut instinct and say it was Israel. I don't care. I could be wrong. It could be that Hamas did this. It's possible. I'm just gonna say it's Israel. It also warned, albeit after gunfire reportedly already erupted, that the Israeli military would be active in the area ahead of the site's opening. So there's Israel. That whole area was crawling with Israel. Israel was all over the place. But it was Hamas. And then you have an expert hearing the gunfire, and he says, that's an Israeli weapon. He sees a picture of the bullet. He says, that's an Israeli bullet. 1,000 feet away from where the massacre happened is an Israeli military base. But Israel had nothing to do with this. Right. Using the passage before 5 a.m. is prohibited, as we were informed by the military that it will be active in the area before and after the specified safe hours. The GHF said in a release on Facebook at 4 in the morning. We remind all residents to stay on the road. This sounds like one of those friggin' dystopian movies. We remind all residents to stay on the road. Straying from it poses a significant danger. What is this, iRobot? You are in danger. You must stay on the designated road or you will be shot. I mean, talk about a police state, right? Talk about a new world order. Everyone's talking about the new world order. You're seeing it. This is it. And then people are wondering why people hate Israel. Why do they hate us? Why do they hate Israel? I don't know. I don't know why. And then you got that David Portnoy guy. Give me a break. That guy's a freaking scumbag. Oh my God. That Dave Portnoy guy is a freaking absolute scumbag. How many Jews have to... He wants to restrict speech. And so he's saying jokes about Jewish people, that can't be tolerated. We can't tolerate that. Oh, but you've made jokes about other people. You've made jokes about rape. Yes, there's a video of David Portnoy joking about rape. And he says, if you're a size 6... Listen, if a woman, if you have a size 6 waist and you're wearing skinny jeans, you know what? You deserve to get raped. You're asking for it. You're asking for it. And then a woman confronted him on this, and she said, "Do you have any idea how offensive that is? Do you have any idea as to why that's so offensive?" You know what he says? I don't know. I haven't the slightest idea why that would offend anyone. It's a joke. It's a joke. People start making jokes about whatever, Israel. Oh, he's losing his shit. Because the reality is very clear. The Zionists know. They read the writing on the wall. People are sick of Israel, and they see shit like this, and they get pissed off, understandably so. Robert Maher, a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Montana State University who specializes in forensic audio analysis, examined the footage for CNN and said that the bursts of gunfire were at a rate of 15 and 16 shots per second, or 900 and 960 per minute, fired from a distance of about a quarter of a mile, 450 meters. Based on the erratic nature of the sound, Maher said that the shots seemed to be spread out, fired repeatedly in one direction. Since the cracks are irregular, it seems more like the gunfire was being sprayed over the area. Trevor Ball, a former U.S. Army senior explosive ordnance disposal team member, said the rate of fire was consistent with the FN MAG, a heavily used machine gun in the Israeli military's arsenal. The FN MAG is commonly equipped on the IDF's Merkava tanks, which several eyewitnesses said they saw open fire on the crowds. So this guy is an expert on firearms and on ballistics, and he says that the sound is consistent with the FN MAG, which is attached to the Israeli Merkava tank. Ball told CNN he could not confirm the specific weaponry used or who fired it, but the rate of fire, he said, is indicated it wasn't consistent with machine guns used by Hamas. Doctors working at Nasser Hospital shared photos with CNN of the bullets retrieved from patients injured and killed in the attack, which weapons experts say appear to match the type of ammunition used in the Israeli military's machine guns. This bullet is consistent with the NATO standard 7.62mm M80, which would be fired by IDF 7.62 times 51mm weapons, including the Negev 7.62 and the FN MAG. So they look at a bullet, they see this bullet, and the experts say, yeah, that's a bullet that would be used by an FN MAG. The sound of the gunfire is consistent with the FN MAG, which Israelis attached to their Merkava tank. So the evidence is pointing to Israel. Videos show chaos around Israeli-backed Gaza food sites. And you can see the footage here of people trying to get food. To assess conditions on the ground, the Times analyzed, this is the New York Times, the Times analyzed imagery from multiple sources, including eyewitnesses, the Israeli military, the United Nations, and the GHF, which stands for the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, or the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, which is a humanitarian distribution project that was started by the Trump administration. Now, the GHF is interesting because it's from what I have read, it's kind of a shady operation. The UN has refused to cooperate with the GHF. There were a lot of people who were asked to be involved in the GHF, and they refused because they said that it just didn't sound very ethical. It didn't sound very ethical the way that they wanted to carry themselves about. And they said, hey, and this was one of the issues that people had with the GHF. They said, hey, you just want to put 3 distribution centers or just a small number of distribution centers, and there are no distribution centers in the north. Why is that? And so the UN said that it's quite obvious that Israel simply wants to push people from the north to the south to ethnically cleanse northern Gaza. And that's why they're putting the distribution centers in the south. Danger and desperation are clear in imagery near the aid sites. Dozens of Palestinians were killed in at least 2 instances after Israeli troops opened fire near the sites. And they say, oh no, there's no genocide. No, it's all just a war. And we're fighting against the Nazis. Oh yeah. Listen, the Americans were more humane than the Israelis. When the Americans were fighting the Nazis, the Americans were more humane. The Israelis have already surpassed the death count in Dresden. They've already killed more people than the Allies did in Dresden, in the bombing of Dresden. They've already dropped more bombs. If you look at the numbers of pounds of bombs that the Americans or the Allies dropped on Dresden, and compare it to the weight of the bombs that the Israelis have dropped on Gaza, the Israelis have already far surpassed the Allies when the Allies were bombing Dresden. So it says here that another GHF video verified by the Times shows crowds of people waiting at the Rafah distribution point as armed contractors pace in front of them. Come back tomorrow, the crowd is told. So they're told. These people are starving. They have not eaten for days. And they're told, come back tomorrow. Oh, gotta go back. Why? Oh, because it's too late. We ran out of food. We ran out of food. That's what they tell them. So what happens as a result of this? What happens as a result is the Gazans come earlier. So they say, okay, we're going to start feeding people at 5 in the morning. So Gazans will come out and say, okay, we're going to be here at 11 p.m. We're coming at 11. because we are not going to starve. We're not going to be deprived of food. And you have people walking for 18 miles. 18 miles just to go get some food. And they're already starving as is. They're already starving. And they're walking. They're waking up. They're not even sleeping. They're getting up before the sun rises to get to the food distribution center by 3 in the morning, by 11 p.m., just to get something to eat. Because they know if you don't get there on time, you don't eat. And here's another thing. Even if you get there on time, there are so many people who are there already that there's massive crowding and people are in a panic. And in the throes of that panic, in the throes of that chaos and mayhem, who gets the food? It's the people who can run the fastest. So the young are the ones who are getting the food. Older folks, they can't run that fast. So they have to depend on younger people to get the food for them. So it's the strong and the fittest that are getting the food. And if you're too physically weak, or if you are too physically hindered to get some food, you're told, tough luck. Goodbye. It is Hunger Games, dystopian level stuff that we are seeing. I'm telling you, you're seeing the future of genocide right here. Now, this is happening in the third world. They want to do this in the first world. First world countries want to do genocide within their own borders or within a certain continent. You're going to see that in the future, by the way. You're going to see genocide happening in the first world. And they're going to be using the same type of technology that the Israelis have been using to kill the Gazans. And people are seeing the effects of Peter Thiel's AI surveillance technology. Palantir is being used in Gaza. And Palantir is watching. Peter Thiel is watching. Elon Musk is watching. They're all watching. How is AI surveillance used as a means to tormenting an entire population and slaughtering a population? You're seeing it. How can ethnic cleansing be done efficiently? You're seeing it. Just like when the Turks or the Ottomans were genociding the Armenians, the Germans were watching. And the Nazis learned from the Ottomans. And so you have to walk through these corridors. You have to walk through these corridors. Look how narrow these corridors are. So then it says, they're humiliating people by making them go through these corridors to get to the distribution point. Mr. Al-Qaradawi said, these corridors are only about 1 meter to 1.5 meters wide. That's it. And here you can see stun grenades being thrown at people. So it says here, one of them posted on an Instagram video on Tuesday showing soldiers in Rafah just over 1,000 feet from the largest aid site, which is behind a building shown at the end of the video. Another aid site can be seen earlier in the clip. So here they are. Here's a distribution center, and you have soldiers 1,000 feet away from the distribution center. So then it says here, the shootings both took place on the narrow route to that site. It's a site where you have Israeli soldiers right nearby. So you have Israeli soldiers right nearby, but Hamas is there with guns blazing. The shootings, plural, both took place on the narrow route to that site. So you have Israeli soldiers right nearby, but Hamas is there, guns blazing, throwing grenades. On Sunday, more than 20 people were killed, according to the Palestine Red Crescent Society, when Israeli soldiers opened fire near the site. 2 days later, at least 27 people were killed, according to the Red Cross and Gaza Health Ministry. The Israeli military said its forces had fired near people who were deviating from the designated access routes and who did not respond to warning shots. Oh, so they did shoot at people. So at first they were saying, well, we didn't shoot anybody. Then they said, oh, no, we did shoot at people, but we shot at them because they were deviating from the designated access routes. Well, of course they were deviating from the access routes. You forced them to go through these narrow corridors. You're talking about thousands upon thousands of people starving. And they know that if they don't get there on time, they get deprived of food and they have to go back home and they have to walk miles back home, empty-handed, starving. Of course they're going to break the rules, but they're doing this on purpose, knowing that you're going to get this type of chaos because they want to torment the population. One video verified by The Times shows people running as short bursts of gunfire are heard along Al-Rashid Road near the Rafah distribution site early Tuesday morning. Some are carrying bags of aid on their backs. So let's go back here. So hold on. So which site did this shooting happen? Near the Rafah distribution site. Let's go back up here. Here's a bunch of soldiers. Here's a bunch of soldiers, and they are 1,000 feet away. They are 1,000 feet away. Near what? 1,000 feet away from the Rafah distribution site. So you have soldiers 1,000 feet. What's 1,000 feet? That's not that far away. That's not very far at all. You can walk 1,000 feet easily. So 1,000 feet away, you have these soldiers, and then it just so happens that not too far away from where the soldiers are, you have this massacre that happens, but it's Hamas, not the soldiers. And the soldiers are just there watching this whole thing happen. They're watching the massacre happening. Is that what you want to tell me? It's obvious what happened, guys. It's obvious that this was a massacre done by the IDF. Or at least this was a massacre that was done by a militia backed by the IDF, because there is a militia in Gaza that's being armed by the IDF as we speak, and this is a criminal organization that Israel has been backing, and this criminal organization has had armed men at the distribution sites, or at least adjacent to the distribution sites. So it's possible that IDF soldiers didn't kill these people directly, but that the killing was done by Israel's proxy. That is a possibility. We have to wait for more information to come out. So it says here that in announcements published on GHF's Facebook page, the group said the Israeli military would be in the area that would prohibit anyone from approaching the aid site before 5 a.m. So they said, if you get here before 5 a.m., you can't come in here. But of course, people are going to get there before 5 a.m. People are going to get there at 11 p.m. People are going to get there at 3 in the morning. Because of the scarcity. It's because of the desperation for food. Of course people are going to get there early because they don't want to go home empty-handed. The military considers anyone advancing into the square ahead of time as endangering their troops. So they make it difficult to get to the food. They give people a very small window of opportunity to get to the food. If they don't get there within a certain point, they have to leave back home. They have to go back home empty-handed. Then, if you get there too early, and if you get too close to the soldiers, they'll shoot you. So they have essentially made this zone into a kill zone. They've made the area into a kill zone. They've made the area around the distribution zones into kill zones. So it says here, some people begin waiting as early as 11 p.m. As early as 11 p.m. The night before in an area more than a mile away, he said. Others arrive after dawn prayers around 4 in the morning. They are supposed to wait for 5 a.m., but the scramble often begins before then, Mr. Keshta said. They push each other and some move in ahead, he said. After all the waiting and chaos, many come away with nothing. With nothing. So, of course, there's going to be chaos. Of course, people are not going to follow the rules. Of course, people are not going to conform to all the rules. People are starving. People are desperate. Give me a break, guys. This is horrendous. This is absolutely horrendous. And you have people wanting to justify this sort of policy because of October the 7th. This is like when Simeon and Levi in the book of Genesis murdered all those Canaanites because the prince of that Canaanite tribe in Shechem raped their sister. Well, the prince raped our sister, so that gives us the right to kill everyone. This is the murderous spirit that we're talking about here. It is the spirit of the accuser. It's the spirit that says, these people did wrong, so therefore we can now do wrong. And We're not going to put any brakes. We're not going to put any sort of restraint on ourselves. We're just going to kill. And believe me, because I've looked into this, you have IDF soldiers who kill people for fun. They get a kick out of this. They do. They get a joy out of this. How do I know that? Because look at the interviews that were done by Haaretz of IDF soldiers who were serving in the Netzarim corridor. They said soldiers would shoot people for fun and they would laugh while doing it. And then you have the Netza Yehudim, the Netza Yehuda battalion in the IDF. This is an IDF battalion that consists entirely of ultra-religious Jews, and these people are operating in the West Bank, and you have many cases of them abusing the populace, and they get a kick out of it. And you have stories, for example, wherein a Netza soldier, I call them Netzas, like Nazis, a Netza will take a stun grenade and throw it into a random home. They will attack people randomly. There was one case where they attacked a Bedouin man just for fun. There was a case where they have beaten people. There was at least one case, where they sexually tormented a man by shoving an object up his anus or something to the likes of that. Or I think they electric shocked either his testicles or his anus. It was some sick ass shit like that. You have these sickos in the IDF. Now, not every IDF soldier is bad. You have IDF soldiers who have become very disillusioned with what's been happening. You have IDF soldiers who are repulsed about what's been happening, and so they report these stories to the media. A lot of the atrocities that have happened in Gaza we know about because of the IDF soldiers who have reported on these war crimes. We know for a fact that IDF soldiers will take civilians and will force them to be human shields. I mean, this is a very murderous and destructive and bloodlustful policy that we're dealing with here. America, as I said, is the head of the snake. I know that Trump has been pushing the Israelis to do a ceasefire, but I don't think he's pushing them enough. And I think what's going on between the Americans and the Israelis is that the Americans, it's the whole art of the deal thing. The Americans want the ceasefire so they can deepen ties with the Arabs and then help form an alliance between the Israelis and the Arabs. But at the same time, the Israelis want something out of this. Netanyahu is in a coalition with some very psychopathic political parties, and one of the parties that he's in alliance with is the Otzma Yehudit Party, which is the Jewish Power Party. Imagine a party that calls itself the White Power Party. This is the Jewish Power Party, and they want to colonize Gaza. They want to build settlements in Gaza, and they know, Netanyahu knows, that if he does not please these fanatics, that he could lose his coalition, because they could, like rats off of a sinking ship, they could leave his coalition, and then the coalition would fall apart. Netanyahu would lose power. He doesn't want that, so he is trying to appeal to the fanatics within his coalition. The coalition, as I said, the fanatics, like I said, they want to have settlements, Jewish settlements in Gaza. So I think what the Americans are doing is they're saying, okay, Israel, we're going to let you continue on with this. Because they are allowing the Israelis to take something so that the Israelis will be pleased. So perhaps the Israelis want to take northern Gaza so they could put settlers there. And that's perhaps the reason why they're not allowing any sort of food distribution centers in the north, because they want to push people through starvation to go down to the south. And so then Israel could take northern Gaza, build settlements, and then Netanyahu could say, okay, Mr. Fanatics, you've gotten what you've wanted. Now let's do a ceasefire. This is all within the realm of possibility from what I have observed. I felt a bullet. Palestinians recount deadly shooting near new Gaza aid site. So it says here, nearly 50 people have been reported killed and 300 others wounded in incidents near the Israeli-backed distribution center, which was designed to keep food out of the hands of Hamas. Hungry and desperate, they raced to secure just one box of food. After nearly 3 months without any aid entering Gaza, Palestinians have learned that an Israeli-backed aid site would open in Rafah. Rafah is in the south. It's near Egypt. Israel promised an orderly system that would improve on the United Nations efforts to distribute much-needed food to Gazans. Almost from the beginning, things went horribly wrong. So like I said, the UN had hundreds of distribution centers. Hundreds. Now there are only 3 distribution centers. Only 3. And you have at least close to 2 million people living in Gaza. And you got 3 zones where people can get food. It's pretty horrible. So it says here that on Saturday night, Mohammed Abdullah, 30, traveled 18 miles, just to get a lunchbox. And you have Israeli soldiers shooting people as they're trying to get lunchboxes. And they want to tell you that they're just like the American soldiers when they were fighting the Nazis. That's what they want you to believe. We're just like the U.S., the American soldiers in Saving Private Ryan fighting the Nazis. That's what we are. Dude, you guys are shooting people as they're trying to get lunchboxes. Don't compare yourselves to the American soldiers who fought the Nazis. You're nothing like them. This is nothing like that. You're shooting fish in a barrel. You got a small region that's all walled up. No one can escape. No one can leave Gaza. You can't leave it. It's not like in Germany where people in Dresden were able to escape to the countryside. That's what happened, by the way, in those German cities that were getting firebombed. They were able to escape to the countryside. People escaped. You can't escape Gaza. You got people all walled up. They can't leave. And you're like those illegal hunters who put bears in fenced out areas to shoot them for fun. That's what you guys are like. And you guys want to compare yourselves to the Allied soldiers fighting the Wehrmacht. This ain't no Wehrmacht. This is shooting fish in a barrel. So Mohammed Abdullah, 30 years old, traveled 18 miles and joined thousands of people aggressively pushing their way forward, trying to reach the aid site. Israeli soldiers formed a wide perimeter around the site, which was overseen by U.S. private security contractors. Suddenly, he heard a hail of gunfire, forcing people to flee in every direction, their terrified screams filling the night sky. A bullet ripped through Mr. Abdullah's face, leaving him writhing in pain. I only took 2 steps before I felt a bullet tear into my right cheek and neck, he said. I started shouting, "People, I'm wounded, help me." The rollout of the new aid effort over the past week by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an effort conceived in Israel and endorsed by the United States, was supposed to help Palestinians get aid while keeping it out of the hands of Hamas. Instead, the effort, criticized by multiple aid groups and the United Nations, has developed into scenes of chaos and death. Chaos and death, everyone. Multiple witnesses blamed Israeli forces for the deadly fire, which Gaza health officials say killed dozens of Palestinians trying to secure aid. The procedures for getting the new aid have often been unclear for Palestinians facing widespread hunger after Israel blocked food from entering Gaza. Many have sought to beat the huge crowds flooding the distribution sites by arriving as early as possible, often after walking long distances. While the UN relied on hundreds of distribution sites across Gaza, the Israeli-backed effort has only 4, creating a bottleneck, and I think one of them was shut down, leaving only 3. So it's nothing. It's not sufficient to feed people. But because they're Gazan, according to the Israelis, they deserve to be tormented. They deserve to be starved. They deserve to be shot at. They deserve to be forced into kill zones. They deserve to be sniped. Oh, we're there to fight terrorists, but yet you can see the photos of the x-rays of children with the bullets in the skull, with the bullet in the neck, with the bullet in the chest. We're fighting terrorists. We're just like the Allies fighting the SS. Right. Sure. Some Palestinians have tried to advance in the line by taking shortcuts to the aid sites outside the officially marked path, but people both on and off that path appear to have come under fire, according to 3 of the witnesses. And people arriving early have been told to come back later by Israeli drones, but many have ignored those calls, worried that they will lose their spot in line. So it's not like, hey, you can come anytime, we're always going to have food available, we got so much stuff here. It's not like a ginormous grocery store. No. Everything is super limited. Logistically, the way they arranged everything, they made it so that they know for a fact there's going to be overcrowding. You only got 3 to 4 freaking sites. How? That's like saying there's only 4 grocery stores to feed 2 million people. For example, the city of San Antonio has over 2 million people. We don't got 4 grocery stores. We got a lot of grocery stores here. Because 4 grocery stores is fuck all to feed a population of 2 million people. Do you see how crazy this is? It's all, my God, it is so fucking obvious. This is by design. It is so obvious. A child could see this. It's so obvious that this whole thing is set up to make Gaza unlivable. Isn't that what Mr. Gallant said? Isn't that what Yoav Gallant said? He said, we're going to make Gaza unlivable. Well, they're doing it. You're seeing the plan being carried out. It's sinisterism. Mohammed Sakar, 43, said he had braved the shooting on Sunday by crouching low to the ground to avoid getting shot at, even as people were stuck nearby. When he finally reached the site, he described a mad scramble as crowds rushed to grab the cardboard boxes of aid strewed in piles on the ground. He said it's like a race for food. Those who win the race get the aid. This is like the Hunger Games. This is like Squid Game. This is like the freaking Purge. This is, oh my God, guys. This is pure dystopianism being seen right before our eyes. Pure dystopianism. Everything is surveilled. How did the Israelis find targets to destroy? How did they find people to kill? They used AI. And they said, well, and how did they determine the targets? They looked at everyone's internet histories, put it all in a system. The system would say, okay, based on your criteria, we got all these addresses. They would hit the houses, kill everybody inside. And then when they didn't have any targets to kill, they would lessen the criteria, or they would widen the criteria so they can find more people to kill. And they would use AI, and everything is super surveilled. And they're going to make they're going to make Gaza into even more of a surveillance state. Kill zones in the middle, for example, in the Netzarim corridor, kids getting shot in the head and the neck and the chest, people being used as human shields, an elderly man getting captured by the Israelis. They put a wire around his neck and they walk him around like a freaking dog on a leash, and they force him to go into houses for 8 straight hours so that if there's a bomb in any one of those houses, the bomb will blow him up and blow him up to pieces. And they did this thousands of times. They used human shields. They used human beings to be dog sniffers, bomb sniffers. And they did this to thousands of people. And the Israelis would drive around. And if they saw someone walking down the road, they would kidnap him and force him to be a human shield. Yes, this has actually been happening. And it's freaking policy. We know this for a fact because look it up. It's called the mosquito policy or the mosquito strategy. Look it up. And the Israelis said, oh, use a mosquito to find a bomb. Use a mosquito to detonate a bomb. What's a mosquito? It's a gazan. They called them mosquitoes. Just like when the Japanese were infecting people with bubonic plague, they would say, oh, we processed this number of logs. Chinese people were referred to as logs. It's dehumanization. That's what this is. It's so insane. You're seeing the future of genocide. That's what you're seeing. And people, when genocide happens in the Western world, people are going to wonder, well, how in the hell was this even not seen? How did people not foresee this? Because people were ignoring Gaza. And they were ignoring the fact that Western AI technology has been getting used to butcher people in Gaza. Palantir and all that freaking, oh my God. All this, what do they call it? Silicon Valley infrastructure and the Silicon Valley world has been profiting out of death in Gaza. And those Nazis, and I will call them that, those Nazis in Silicon Valley have been watching this with glee, making money out of death. and they're seeing how their technology is being used to kill people. And what do people in Silicon Valley believe in? They all believe in eugenics. They all do. Whites, the Jewish ones believe in it. The white ones believe in it. The Indian Silicon Valley guys believe in it. All these tech Nazis, they believe in that stuff. They all believe in CRISPR. They all believe in embryo selection. They all believe in they all believe in this idea of conceiving human beings in a lab and growing them like freaking farm animals and breeding them like farm animals. And they will make multiple embryos in a lab, and they'll say, oh, which embryo do you want to be implanted into your wife or girlfriend or whoever? Oh, I want this embryo because this embryo has the genes that I want. What about the other embryos? Oh, I don't know. Put them in freezers or put them in a trash. Put them in the bin. I mean, it's pure dystopian eugenics, and that dystopianism, which leads to death, is being seen in plain sight in the Middle East, in Gaza. You're seeing it. This is the future of genocide. Using AI to find targets, lessening the criteria to create a bigger list of targets. You're seeing it. Listen, if Nazis ever take over Germany again, and they want to do a purge of Germany, not just of migrants, but of people who are of people who disagree with them, they're just going to say, okay, get everyone's internet history, get all the search results, or get all of the search terms that people have used when they're on Google or on whatever search engine. Gather all of the internet histories of everyone in this country. Put it all in a giant AI processing system, and the AI technology is going to tell us all the addresses of people who may or may not agree with us or may disagree with us. And then we're just going to hit all those houses. We're going to get the special forces, police, and we all know how the German police force has all these Nazis in it. And then we're going to do a sting operation. We're going to round people. I mean, this is it. And they could do this in the United States. Using AI. They're watching Gaza. That's what this is. And I don't have a white paper or I don't have a document that says, this is proof. We're actually looking at Gaza to see the effects of this type of technology, to see how a population is tormented in certain ways. No, but it's just obvious that's what's happening. If you sell technology to be used for killing, you're going to be seeing the effects of that technology. It's obvious this is being observed, everyone. It's obvious. 2 days later, on Tuesday, a similar scene unfolded. Amid the crowd, Waleed Abdeen, 16 years old, was shot in his upper body when gunfire erupted as he and thousands of other people approached the aid site. He suffered damage to his spleen and kidneys. "We want food," he said, struggling to speak after undergoing emergency surgery. "I had to try to help my family." I mean, guys, how can... You see, this is where I have to appreciate David Smith, the libertarian guy. He did a debate with Douglas Murray, and Douglas Murray was sitting there saying, people aren't starving, there's no genocide happening. No, it's not happening. Have you been there? Have you been to Gaza? Have you been there? Have you? And Dave Smith said, don't you have any compassion for these people? I mean, really, at this point, you don't have to be a Christian. These people don't have to be Christians for you to feel sorry for them. This is truly just human compassion. And here's something that I really want to say about this. Humanity transcends religion. These people don't follow my religion. These people are heretics. According to the Catholic Church, according to the Eastern Orthodox Church, these people are heretics. They reject the Trinity. But I still feel sorry for them. I still have compassion for them. Now, you could say, they're heretics, Ted. They believe in Islam, they whatever. Okay, you know what? The Samaritans were barbarians. Go read about the Samaritan religion. Go read about how Samaritanism was a fusion between Judaism and paganism. Go read about the weird beliefs of the Samaritans. The Samaritans weren't exactly a kosher cult, so to speak. And Jesus gives us the story of the Good Samaritan. And he tells this story to a Jewish man who was an expert on the law, and the Jewish man says, the Jewish scholar or whatever he was says, I follow the law, I do what's right in God's eyes, I do this, I do that, and then Jesus said, okay, well, what is the law? And he says, I follow the law, and Jesus says, the law is to what? To love your God with all your heart, and all your strength and all your might and all your soul, and to love your neighbor. And the neighbor says, well, who is my neighbor? And Jesus says, okay, you want to know who your neighbor is? Well, I'm going to explain to you who your neighbor is. Your neighbor is basically someone who has compassion. That's your neighbor. And he gives the story of the Good Samaritan. Because there was a man in the story who gets ambushed, he gets robbed, and he is left for dead. And it says that an Orthodox Jew passed the man on the road and said, well, I'm very busy and I have other things to do and I have to go to synagogue. Oy vey, I don't really give a shit about this guy. And then you have another guy who passes by, and he's also an Orthodox Jew, and he just passes by and says, whatever, who cares? And he keeps on going. Then a Samaritan comes by. And the Samaritan is a heretic. And the Samaritan has compassion. What does Jesus say? Those are the key words in that story. What does Jesus say? He says, and the Samaritan had compassion. And he saves the man's life. And then Jesus tells this person who he is having this conversation with, which is your neighbor? And the man says, the Samaritan. And Jesus says, you have answered wisely. The Samaritan is your neighbor. The man with compassion is your neighbor. Even though the Samaritan has the false religion. How do you then reconcile the fact that someone who has the correct religion may be completely callous and absent of compassion? So who is your neighbor? The one who has compassion. Regardless of religious differences, regardless if the person may not be Orthodox or Orthodox, the one who has compassion is your neighbor. That means regardless of religion, we must have compassion. This is what Jesus is saying. Thus, compassion or humanity transcends religion. Is religion important? Yes. Is theology important? Absolutely. Is orthodoxy important? It is of the utmost importance. But if you have the correct theology, but you are absent of compassion, does that theology really matter in your case? It doesn't. Because while you are following the flesh of the law, you are absent of the spirit of the law, which is justice and mercy. So this is things that you have to keep in mind. There is a true theology, absolutely. The Orthodox Jew had a true theology. He had the Orthodox theology when he was passing the man as he was dying. Plain and simple. There was the Samaritan who had the false theology, but he had compassion. St. Paul addresses this. He touches upon this issue when he says that I could do all these good things, but if I have not love, it is all for nothing. So you can have the true theology, true, that's true. But if you don't encompass the spirit of that theology, do you really have that theology? Do you really encompass it? Do you really embody it? I think St. John Chrysostom said something to the likes of, the beggar who is in front of the church is there to teach you something. If you come to this church and have no compassion for the beggar, then what is the point of coming to church? Right? This is something that we have to keep in mind. They're Muslim, they're this, they're that, they're this. When I see these people suffering, I cannot help but feel horrified, to be honest with you, to be very clear with you. Here is the problem in this entire dialogue on Israel, is that almost no one has a balanced position. Most people have a very extreme position, and this is on both sides. So if you go to the pro-Palestine people, we'll just start with the pro-Palestine people because, everybody wants to talk about, well, what about Hamas this? What about Hamas that? The problem with the pro-Palestine people is that they will say things that are true. But they will say that Hamas is amazing, right? Or they'll say that October the 7th wasn't a bad thing. That's the thing, right? So that's an extreme. The pro-Israel people will give you facts about the wrongdoing that Palestinians have done, such as October the 7th, but they want you to think that Israel can do no wrong and that there are no war crimes. So both sides are extreme, and both sides have very unstable positions. So the people who are listening to Nick Fuentes and the people who are fans of Nick Fuentes, they will point to facts about Israel that are 100% true, but they will also tell you that we should all become fanboys for Adolf Hitler. So they will say, look, Israel is murdering people, and they would be right, but they want you to revere one of the greatest mass murderers in human history. So that's an extreme position, and if you deviate from that extreme position in any way, they want nothing to do with you. So a Nick Fuentes fan could listen to me and say, oh yeah, I agree with him on Israel, but the moment I start criticizing Nazism, they're off. They're done. They want nothing to do with me. So, and the same thing goes for people who are pro-Israel. They'll hear me talking about the dangers of anti-Semitism. They will hear me talking about the dangers of this reemergence of Nazism that we are currently witnessing. And they'll say, yeah, Ted's right. And the moment I talk about Israeli war crimes, they want nothing to do with me. So this is the problem that we're in, right? This is the imbalance. And so if the Nick Fuentes fans, or if the people who really hate Israel start listening to me, they'll say, oh, Ted's right. But the moment they hear me criticizing the far right, or the moment they hear me talking about the Holocaust, they want nothing to do with me. They're like, oh, Ted's wrong. You're an idiot. You believe in the Holocaust. You're believing in a scam. So that's the problem, is that there is a huge lack imbalance in the world. Let's see here. Damn, the extreme Zionists are trying real hard to establish greater Israel. Yep, exactly right. That's what they want to do. Third temple and everything. And I think they are going to try to build a third temple. I think that is something that we can expect. Not now, but maybe in the next, 10 years or so. I think they're really going to try to build a third temple. And it's going to be ugly. And I don't know. I got the Bannerlord music playing in the background. I love the Bannerlord soundtrack. I don't know if they're actually going to complete the construction, but I think that there is going to be at least an attempt at building a third temple. And either way, it's going to be bloody, because the Arabs are going to get mad because of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. People are going to get murdered. The Arabs are going to get murdered. Jews are going to get murdered. And then you're going to have Israelis who are going to say, hey, this is wrong. Fanatic Jews are going to murder those Jews. Jews are going to kill Jews. It's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a complete cacophony of chaos and noise, and it's going to be a complete quagmire of blood and gore. It's going to be insane. Let's see here. Many even evangelists and Pentecostals, even some Catholics, are okay with the Zionism and Third Temple stuff. Yep, so they can expect the apocalypse. Yeah, and when the Third Temple starts getting constructed, they're going to say, this is it. The temple is going to get built. And then if the temple does get built, then they're going to say, oh my God, where's the Antichrist? Is he going to come? And the Jews are going to say, we have our guy. They're going to have their Messiah. And this Messiah is not going to be the real Messiah. He's going to be the Antichrist, or an Antichrist. Those Zionists become the very thing that they feared and hated. Absolutely. Yep. They become the Nazis. They become they become like Hamas. They become what they claim to be fighting against. Zionists living in Palestine during World War II mocked the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Zionists have always been shit. I didn't know that, but I don't find that very hard to believe, because I could totally see them saying things like, oh, you guys were just victims. Here's what people don't really understand about the Jewish world right after the Holocaust. You see, right now, and for decades, Jewish people have been talking about the Holocaust, and they've been saying we can never forget, we should never forget, we will always remember the Holocaust, etc., which is all fine and good. I have no issue with that. But you see, that's not how the world was. That's not how the Jewish world was like right after World War II. So right after World War II, when the Holocaust has just been stopped, and it was still very fresh in people's minds, and people were just getting to know about the Holocaust, Holocaust survivors who came to the U.S. were terribly mistreated, not by non-Jewish Americans, but by American Jews. And don't take it from me, Norman Finkelstein recounts this in his book, The Holocaust Industry, and he did a whole video on this. Actually, he did an interview in which he discussed this whole issue, and he talks about how his poor mother, who survived a death camp, was terribly treated by fellow Jews in the United States. And they would say things to her like, oh, you survived the Holocaust? Oh, who did you have to screw over to survive? You must have collaborated with the Nazis, didn't you? Which Nazi SS officers did you have to collaborate with to survive? Who did you backstab? How many Jews did you backstab to survive? And so they would mentally torture people who were Holocaust survivors. They would do this. And then something happened, I want to say by the 1980s or 90s, where the Holocaust became this giant point of discussion. It became this very mainstream topic. And then all of a sudden, all that mockery ended. And it stopped. And Holocaust survivors were then treated, and they were treated very well, and they were embraced by their fellow American Jews, by their fellow Jews in the United States. The Red Cross said its 60-bed field hospital in Rafah in southern Gaza had collectively received 40 bodies on Sunday and Tuesday and 323 patients, most of whom had gunshots and shrapnel wounds, and some of whom later died. On Tuesday, the hospital received the highest number of people wounded by weapons in a single episode since it was established over a year ago, the Red Cross said. A field hospital operated by UK Med in southern Gaza received 65 patients on Sunday and Tuesday, mostly with gunshot wounds and blast injuries, according to Mandy Blackman, a nurse overseeing the hospital's operations. Victoria Rose, a plastic and reconstructive surgeon who was volunteering at Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza, said dead and wounded people had streamed into the emergency room. It was so absolutely packed that people were being nursed on the floor, she said. So it says here that a UN briefing paper circulated before the GHF initiative was launched last week let me just read this again. A UN briefing paper circulated before the GHF initiative was launched last week warned of overcrowded distribution sites and said that Israeli forces or American contractors might use force to control crowds. So the UN was already warning about this before the GHF was established. They were saying, listen, if you do things this way, you're going to have overcrowding. People are going to get shot. They were already saying this. And guess what? Their fears, their concern ended up being true. It's just an absolute nightmare. Jalal Al-Holmes, 35, said he left a tent in southern Gaza where his family was sheltering around 1:30 in the morning. Sunday, accompanied by his brother, he walked for 2 hours through darkness to Rafah, where he joined throngs of people trying to secure food. Israeli military vehicles, he said, could be seen in the distance, and drones could be heard hovering in the sky. This is the future. It was Mr. Al-Holmes' fourth attempt this week to get a box, he said. On previous trips, he said, all the aid had been taken by the time he made it into the distribution site. So you see why people are going in there super early? That's the reason why. They have no choice. So they make the window of opportunity to get the food very narrow. They only allow for a very limited number of distribution sites to be located in Gaza. And then when you actually get there, there is a chance that you may not even get your hands on food because of the overcrowding, because there's so many people there. And by the time you get to the aid site, there may not be any food available left for you. So of course people are going to overcrowd. Of course people are going to get there very early, regardless of the rules established by Israel. Israel says, oh, you're not allowed to come to this site by this time. Well, F you, if I get here by the time you say I should be here, then there may not be enough food available, or there's going to be so many people here that by the time I get here, or by the time I get to the place to get the food, there's not going to be enough left for me, or there's not going to be anything left for me. So of course people are going to overcrowd. Of course people are going to get there early. Of course people are going to panic. Of course there's going to be all sorts of chaos and pandemonium. Of course you are going to have a cacophony of chaos. And the Israelis said, oh, we set up the rules, and then they're not following the rules. Well, yeah, of course, because you made the rules freaking impossible to follow. No one would follow this. You think these fat Americans here in the United States are gonna follow these stupid rules if these rules were ever applied here? People would be panicking. People would be rushing. People would be stampeding on each other here in the United States if we made these sorts of rules here in America. Have some understanding. Put yourself in their situation. Mr. Al-Holm said people were trying to push their way to the front of the crowd before the shooting began around 4:30 in the morning. It felt like it came from all over, he said. His brother was shot in the leg, he said, and taken to a hospital where he underwent surgery. Despite the danger, Mr. Al-Holm said he had few options other than returning to the distribution site so that he could feed his 2 sons and 2 daughters. The system isn't just at all. The system is not just at all. It requires me risking my life for food, he said. So it says here, testimonies from Gazan civilians, video footage, and inconsistencies in the IDF's official statements strengthen claims that the shooting, which killed dozens near the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid distribution center this past week, was carried out by Israeli soldiers, not Palestinian militants, as Israeli officials initially claimed. According to the testimonies, the shootings occurred roughly 1 kilometer from the aid center in Rafah, and Israeli drones and armored vehicles were present in the area at the time. These accounts are supported by testimonies from Palestinian and foreign medical teams at hospitals in southern Gaza, which received dozens of gunshot victims, both dead and wounded. On Wednesday, the Israeli army built earth mounds around the aid distribution centers to prevent further friction between troops and local Palestinians. This followed accusations by Gaza authorities that soldiers had fired at civilians approaching the aid centers. While the army denied most of these claims, it decided to set up the mounds due to the global scrutiny the events had triggered and the damage they could cause to the legitimacy of Israel's war effort. When the first shooting occurred on Sunday, resulting in dozens of deaths, the army publicly denied any involvement. However, in closed-door conversations, military officials acknowledged that gunfire had been used in the area. By Tuesday, the gap between the Israeli and Palestinian accounts had narrowed, with the IDF conceding that soldiers had fired warning shots to drive people away. According to Gaza's health ministry, that gunfire killed 27 people. So Israel is admitting that they did fire rounds at the people, but it was warning shots. Oh, and they were firing at suspects, but dozens of people are dead. The use of warning shots aligns with testimony given to Haaretz by the IDF officer with direct knowledge of operations near the distribution centers. The officer revealed that several senior commanders had considered managing the crowds through the use of live fire. So this IDF soldier spoke with Haaretz, and he told Haaretz that the commanders around these distribution zones had discussed guiding the crowds, managing the crowds through live fire. The intent was to direct the population using gunfire, the officer said. The army treated it as a standard combat situation involving suspects entering a war zone. But you can't direct crowds of that size with live fire. No shit. If you want them to feel safe enough to access the areas you've opened. So they said, okay, here we got the aid sites. Okay, we're going to use bullets to guide people. And you know you had some sick bastards who were shooting people for fun. I don't know that for certain, but that's what I suspect. These statements are echoed in reports by Doctors Without Borders. People were fighting over 5 pallets of food. They told us to come get food, and then they started shooting from every direction. I ran 200 meters before I realized I've been shot. This isn't aid. It's a lie. Are we supposed to get food for our children and die? Testified Mansour Sami Abdi. A resident of Rafah who was displaced to Mawasi in Khan Yunis, was at the distribution center during the first incident. He firmly rejected the IDF's claim that local militants had fired first. That's a baseless fabrication, he told Haaretz. There were no militants. There were planes, artillery, and unmanned vehicles. The people there were innocent civilians coming to receive aid. According to A, what I saw was unbearable. Gunfire for several long minutes from all directions. There was a machine gun mounted on a crane, and I saw it firing automatically, like a robot. And this was in addition to the drones. The shooting came from every direction, as if the people who came there were launching an invasion, not desperate people looking for food. Fatma, a resident of Khan Yunis, recommended that she heard from friends of her neighbor Fuad Abdu Al-Kir, 34, who was killed on Tuesday at the distribution center. He had been living with his mother and brother in a tent they set up over the ruin of their old home. His mother says he hadn't eaten for 3 days and only drank water. His nephews were crying from hunger. That's what pushed him to take the risk and go to Rafah, she told Haaretz. His friends said they arrived at around 5 in the morning and thousands were already gathered near the site. That's why they come before 5 a.m. The Israelis say, oh, come by 5. By the time they get there by 5 a.m., there's already crowds. Crowds will have already gathered together. And it's very difficult to... You don't even know if you're going to get your hands on the food. His friends said they arrived at around 5 in the morning and thousands were already gathered near the site. They saw tanks in the area. A loudspeaker announced that there would be no aid distribution that day and told people to turn back. But there were so many people that turning back was not possible. So they kept... So they get there by 5 and then they're told, sorry, you have to go back. But they tell people to get there by 5. And then they say you have to go back. And then they wonder why you have people panicking. Do you see what I'm talking about here? This is the nightmare that this is. But there were so many people that turning back was not possible. So they kept moving forward. The army fired into the air to get people to retreat, but they were hungry. They'd come all this way for aid and didn't want to turn back. Some dropped to the ground and tried crawling forward on their stomachs. Fuad was shot in the chest. His friend Iyad lifted him on his shoulders, but he was shot too and bled to death. Fuad's wife is 5 months pregnant. Both of them died without flour, without a single scrap of food. Nothing. Nothing. This is a nightmare. This is Children of Men. Go watch that movie if you have not already. This is the film Children of Men. According to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, since its operations began the previous Monday, it has distributed 107,520 food boxes, which it claims included more than 7 million meals. On most days, aid distribution was limited to a single site in Tel al-Sultan in southern Rafah, near the Egyptian border. On Wednesday of last week, a second center operated on the Morag route in southern Gaza. And on Thursday, according to the foundation, 3 sites were active. In Tel al-Sultan on the Morag route and in the Al-Borej refugee camp area near the Netzarim corridor. That's where the Israelis had kill zones. For 3 consecutive days this week, the Red Cross reported receiving numerous casualties at its field hospital in Rafah. According to the organization, all those wounded said they were injured while trying to reach aid distribution centers. On Sunday, 179 people were brought in, 21 of whom were pronounced dead. On Monday, 50 casualties were brought in, with 2 confirmed dead. On Tuesday, 184 casualties were brought in, including 19 declared dead on arrival and another 8 who died later. So it says here, a CNN investigation based on videos filmed by Gazans on their way to receive humanitarian aid in Rafah on Sunday concluded that dozens of civilians who were reported shot were hit by IDF fire. Experts, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, experts analyzing the sound of the gunfire and the locations in the videos determined that the shots most likely came from machine guns mounted on tanks positioned in areas fully under Israeli military control. So they got an expert to watch the videos, to hear the gunfire. He said, okay, that gunfire is coming from something that's very professional, something that's quite advanced in comparison to the guns that Hamas has. This sounds like something that would come out of an Israeli machine gun. And then they look at the bullets. They have a picture of a bullet that was taken out of a body. And the expert looked at the bullet and he said, that is a bullet that would be used by the IDF. Their analysis showed that the ammunition matched that used by the Israeli military. While the IDF initially denied that soldiers had fired at civilians, it later admitted that troops had fired warning shots at suspects, so people were shot at. We know this for a fact. About 1 kilometer from the aid distribution center, according to CNN, the IDF declined to comment further on their findings. Mohammed, a paramedic who accompanies medical terms, was present during the incidents on both Sunday and Tuesday. He said the shooting was directed at civilians who were following instructions, but many have strayed from the designated route due to crowding. The army told everyone to stay on the paved road, and everyone did, he said. At some point, live rounds were fired at the crowd. Most injuries were direct shots to the head and chest. The gunfire came from ships, drones, and tanks. The army was not prepared for so many people, and the area couldn't accommodate them. Most of the victims were women and children. Sammy T, 32, is originally from Rafah, but now lives in a makeshift tent in Khan Yunis with his wife, mother, younger brother, and 10 other relatives. On what he feared might be his last night on Earth, Sammy left his tent at around 3 in the morning. Again, this guy was trying to get there early. Tuesday, to try once again to collect food from the GHF distribution center. So this guy was trying numerous times to get his hands on some food. He wasn't able to, and then he decided, okay, I'm going to leave at 3 in the morning. And I'm going to get there early. I took the coastal road. I passed what used to be a fish restaurant in Khan Yunis and immediately heard nonstop gunfire. Terrified and uncertain whether to move forward or retreat, he kept going until he reached a mosque in Musawi near Rafah. I was too scared to even look sideways, he said. People were already gathered there, and we tried to push forward, hoping to be among the first in line. As they moved ahead, he said, the shooting intensified, and it was clear it was aimed directly at them. I threw myself to the ground. People around me were screaming out names, brothers, friends, anyone they had come with. One guy next to me shouted, I can't feel my legs. His friends kept telling him he was okay and tried to help him up, but he couldn't stand. When they lifted his shirt, they saw he'd been shot in the spine. Sammy paused. I can't forget how he pleaded with them. Don't leave me. Die with me, but don't leave me alone. They didn't leave him. They carried him to the Red Cross. There was a hole in the wall, and I jumped in to hide. What I saw turned my hair gray. I stepped on someone by accident and apologized. But the guy next to him looked at me and said, Who are you talking to? He's dead. Sammy looked around. There were bodies everywhere, some dead, others wounded, and a few people trying to help. A guy showed up with a cart shouting for people to load the wounded so we could take them to the Red Cross. Under a palm tree, Sammy and others lay face down, the air thick with the smell of blood. We waited there for what felt like forever. Around 4:45 a.m., things quieted down a bit and we started moving again. But then the shooting started again. This time it came from Apache helicopters above us. There was nowhere to hide. The best you could do was lie flat and let people fall on top of you. I couldn't tell anymore who was wounded and who was dead. As soon as we reached the flag area, it felt like stones lit on fire were flying at us. Israeli tanks were firing directly into the crowds. We screamed and ran. And I remember praying, God, I don't want food. I don't want aid. I just don't want to die and leave my mother to mourn me. Sammy eventually managed to flee. When I finally reached the distribution site, he said, everything was gone. There was nothing left. But I thanked God I was still alive. It's horrific. Truly horrific. On his way back, he ran into a man he knew who had managed to grab a snack of food and asked Sammy to help carry it. When I lifted it, he shouted, Wait, you're covered in blood. I looked down. My clothes were soaked, but it wasn't my blood. What I went through felt like a scene from Squid Game. Only worse, he said, shaking his head. I swore to myself I'd never go back there, no matter how hungry we get. This was Sammy's third attempt to collect aid from GHF. He'd gone twice before and come back empty-handed. One of those times, he recalls, there was shooting as well, but nothing like what happened that morning. It was the worst thing I've ever lived through, he said. According to testimonies and footage, most of the food is taken by the strongest individuals. I mean, this is survival of the fittest. Truly a nightmare. According to testimonies and footage, most of the food is taken by the strongest individuals. Those who can run and carry heavy loads, while women, children, and the elderly are left with scraps or return empty-handed. In one video, people are seen opening boxes at the distribution center and taking only the most valuable items. The Rafah resident who fled to Muwasi, said he set out for the distribution site at 9:30 p.m. So this guy was trying to get there super early. According to him, the shooting continued until nearly 5 a.m. When we finally reached the aid site, there was nothing left. Again, it's a complete nightmare. And the question is, when is enough enough? What's the limit? How many people are you allowed to kill in the name of war? The Canaanites of Shechem were butchered by the first Israelites. They were butchered by Levi and Simeon. And Jacob said, Levi, your line is cursed because you have shed innocent blood. This is in the book of Genesis. Your line is cursed, and it will be scattered in the future. Well, centuries passed, and nothing happened to Levi. And then here comes Jesus, and he says, yeah, Levi, your priesthood, it's about to come to an end. How do I know that? Because Jesus was harvesting wheat on the Sabbath. And the Levites came and they said, what are you doing? Picking wheat on the Sabbath. Don't you know it's the Sabbath? And Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man made for the Sabbath. And he gives the ears of wheat, the bundles of wheat to his disciples. What was he saying? He was saying, you see, I'm giving the wheat to my disciples because the wheat harvest is coming. And it's going to be the ultimate sacrifice. The wheat sacrifice is coming. The sacrifice that Melchizedek offered. Not the sacrifice that you offered, but the sacrifice that Melchizedek offered when he was with Abraham. The sacrifice of bread and wine. That is the sacrifice I am bringing. And I'm giving this wheat to my disciples because these guys, my disciples, are going to replace you. Your day is near. So they killed him because he was a threat to them. And then decades went by and nothing happened to the Levites. And they thought, we killed him. We're still here. He's dead. And what happened to the Levites? They got destroyed by the Romans. The temple got destroyed. And as the temple was engulfed in the flames and the smoke was building up into the air, the Levitical priests went before the Roman Caesar, got on their knees and begged for their lives, and Caesar said, in almost biblical terms, now that your temple has been destroyed, of what good is your priesthood? And he had those priests executed. And that harkened back to what Jesus told them. The master will destroy the wicked tenants. The master of the vineyard will destroy the wicked tenants. And they were destroyed. And that was the end of the Levites. And so the massacre happens in Gaza, and the Israelis are saying, what? They're dead. We're alive. We're winning. Ha ha. But when mercy is denied, justice is realized.